Check, check, check. Welcome to the One Life One Chance podcast. I'm your host, Toby Morse. Today I have a very, very special guest. I've known this man, over 25 years at least. Yeah. We'll get into that. Welcome to the podcast, please, ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, Mr. Danny Boy.
Hey.
O'Connor.
There it is.
And what does O'Connor mean again?
The translation is funny because I seen you yesterday on Beverly getting one of those smoothies, and I was like, I'll take a $20 smoothie with you. O'Connor, in the Irish language, translates to lover of hounds, which is very true because right now I got Stella,
exactly,
your dog, getting a belly rub from me, and I don't know why animals and small children follow me around like the Pied Piper. If I go to weddings, I'm a big hit, and I always chalk it up to being 6'6", but people are like, no, bro, like there's other, they just, maybe I got a good vibe, maybe I don't.
Good vibe. All right, so let's start. I want to take it back before obviously you get where you're at right now, but born and raised, where were you born?
I was born in Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York.
And then when did you move to California? Like how soon?
When I was 6. So I was born in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
At 2 months old, we got evicted. My father went to prison, and my mother couldn't pay the rent, and so we were living on Cropsey Avenue in Bensonhurst. And so my mother said, we got to do something. So she moved back in with her parents who lived in Staten Island. So my early years were spent in Staten Island. I went to PS 41. We lived with my grandma for a few years. My mother remarried, and we moved down the street to Tyson Lane's Projects, which was a Trump Senior, Fred Trump owned half of New York, and we lived in a projects right by a Masters on Highland Boulevard, and Staten Island people know where that's at. But and then around age 6, my mother was a key punch operator at the Chase Manhattan Bank. Pre-computers, you had to feed it with an index card with a bunch of rectangles popped out, and that's how it knew, what you were telling it. And early on, my uncle was in the programming in the computer industry, and if you wanted to be a programmer, California was the place to come. And so we came here to California when I was 6, and we moved to the San Fernando Valley. And at that time, there was a lot of aerospace and military I don't know, what are you going to call it, industrial complex. There was Lytton, where my mother worked, Teledyne, Rocketdyne, Rockwell, Hughes Aircraft, and 20 other ones. All the rocket engines for all of the space missions they were doing were built out there. My mother worked on the Star Wars program, which was our defense system against the Russians if there was ever thermonuclear war. Yeah, they were programming for that. So to visit my mother we rarely did, but she had I don't know, top secret clearance. You had a badge where you had a key in, and we couldn't just go where my mom worked. We had to meet her out in the lobby and wait, and she couldn't bring us in there. So, but that's a lot of the valley. That's like the little hidden secret of the San Fernando Valley, especially on the west side of it. It's all of those things. They're now gone. I just went up with the LAPD in a helicopter, and we went over some of those places where there's Nike missile bases all up in the hills in Chatsworth over there by Spawn Ranch where Manson was. Yeah. And there was also a meltdown back there, and I forget, it was a Teledyne, a Rocketdyne. They had a nuclear meltdown there in the 60s, and that ground is still tainted. And sadly enough, and I hope that nobody takes this as disrespect or whatever, but it's not, Skylar, Vince Neal's and Sharice Neal's daughter, died at 5 because they pulled a Nerf-sized tumor out of her stomach because their mansion was up in that area in Chatsworth, and that ground is still glowing. And I'm shocked that people still live up there, and they do. And,
people know that story?
Of course they do.
Yeah.
Of course they do. And the only reason I say no disrespect is I had ran into Vince Neal once, which everybody knows, and was talking to him first. I said, listen, bro, I know your daughter, I know your wife, your ex-wife, like chill out. He was being a dick. And he tried to swing on me. I knock him out, but I just, you know what I mean? It's one of those weird, like, I don't know why we're talking about that, but so Chatsworth and the Valley, it's got a crazy history. And so I moved to the Valley. For me, it was culture shock because I'm coming from, Brooklyn and Staten Island, and then I moved to the San Fernando Valley. Todd Bridges from Different Strokes lived a block over. Dana Plato was in that neighborhood. Danielle Brisbois, which is another 80s like TV, movie of the week star. It's just big change, go to the roller rink, and Adam Rich from 8 is Enough, and it was just like completely surreal. And then I spoke different, I dressed different, I moved different, and so
brothers and sisters.
Yeah, one sister, and at the time I didn't know I had an older brother who was given up for adoption, and that wasn't until years later. So, but yeah, just a younger sister. But it was culture shock. And then my mother used to send me back just about every summer to my aunt and uncle's place, and we would fly into Newark. They would pick us up in a station wagon, and then we would drive to Springfield, Missouri, because that's where my aunt was from. She was grew up on a farm, and if you wanted to get out of Springfield, Missouri, you joined the Army back in the days, and that's how they met. But I definitely attribute those trips every summer to my wanderlust and my spirit of adventure. Since a young age, I was in the back seat of a station wagon going on a road trip, and so it lends itself to touring and all the stuff that we do. Some people, I know people, big guys that that for years didn't like touring, and it was like literally needed medication to just to be able to function away from home. And there's people that, for me, I loved it. Anywhere is there. I love being out. Now that I'm 50, I don't, I'm like, oh, you got to go hit the road. It's a necessary evil. But once I'm out there, I'm like, this is cool. Cause you get to window shop the world. That's pretty cool. It is the perks of being in a band.
So your mom pretty much raised you guys?
Yeah, we were latchkey kids, and my mother was always at work, and I didn't have any father around. My stepfather died when soon after of cirrhosis. He died at 35 of cirrhosis of the liver. That's how hard he was drinking. So we didn't have any of that parental figure. So it was easier for my mother to send us back every summer, which it was a great thing. I liken it to like a Glenn Friedman experience, like a poor man's Glenn Friedman. If people out there listening may not know who Glenn is one of my favorite photographers on the planet, and also he's the executive producer of the first Suicidal Tendencies record. And,
that's right.
He did. He lent his money, like 10 or 15 grand when he was in SMU to them to put that first album out. But any hardcore punk, skate, hip-hop photo, that they're his, most of them, all the great stuff. But why I say that is because he's from like Brentwood, and then started getting hired at like 14 to go to Cherry Hill, New Jersey, to do skate photos at the skate park that used to be there, and they were flying him around, and he was the right place at the right time for me. I just was able to see a lot of early hip-hop and R&B stuff in New York, and then be in LA where it was all skate, surf, Dogtown, Fast Times at Ridgemount High, punk, but a different punk. Like we had a punk gang. That people know that about me, or they may not. Your podcast, but I was part of that whole. When dudes were gangbanging in the punk scene as well. So, but going to New York every year, I was out there looking for hip hop stuff. It was so
the best of both worlds.
Obscure. I'd come back and hold court in LA. My friends are like, get out of here. No way. I'm like, yo, bro. And I'd tell them about bands they never heard of. And then I would bring bands back to New York. People never heard of Oingo Boingo in New York. They didn't know who Fishbone was in New York at the time. My age kids. There was no internet. It was like MTV, and they weren't getting those kind of looks at that point, perhaps. And so it was cool to do that, to be like, you just had a whole different folder of greatness that they didn't have so much. And so it really shaped who I am, and I'm very happy that it turned out that way, that I was going back and forth coast to coast at a time where it meant something. Now, you can access anything you want within the internet.
Totally. 2 seconds from now.
It's changed dramatically.
And what about your dad? You ever see your dad after he went to jail?
No, I never. I met him maybe once or twice. One time I think he put his hands on my mother, and I pulled his hair from the back seat. I think it was the only time my mother was proud of me. Like I defended her at a young age. But he was an alcoholic, and unfortunately he ended up homeless, or was homeless for quite some time in the end, and somebody decided that it'd be fun to pour gasoline on him and light him on fire. So when I was about 17, I remember coming home from the mall. My mother's like, you got a second? I'm like, yeah. She's like, unfortunately, your father was murdered. And I was like, oh, shit. Oh, well, pass the ketchup. Anyway, what time's dinner? It just was like a hearing about a guy you had heard about that you really never met. So he was never in my life like that. So it doesn't have that same impact if it was your, somebody that was in your life. But it's still, it's, again, all of those things in the end, and we can get to this, but, some of the worst things that happened or situations turn out to be the best motivations for doing better things. So you can let that define you, and it's a great reason to drink. It's like a permanent excuse for me to drink my life away. Somebody murdered my dad. My mother never wanted kids, and here I am, fucking poor me. And for years, that's what I did. I poured me a drink. And so these are now things that I go, so what, now what? You know what I mean? Like, you're either going to, you know, accept it and move on and make the best of it, or you're going to constantly point and fault everybody out for why you're not, you know, doing what you should be doing.
Did you start at a young age? Like, so what was that transition, moving to California and then going to school here? Like, was that a hard transition? Or?
Yeah, I mean, at first I went to military school. They were like, it was like get this kid some kind of discipline and some stuff. And it was, I went to military school, and I was just talking to a guy yesterday about this in a similar situation where he's like, man, I came from a different state. My mother remarried. They put me in Harvard Westlake, or when it was before it was both of those combined. And he's like, dude, I flunked out immediately because coming from public schools, the curriculum is like light years away from that. So I went to military school, and I'm not book smart in that way in the first place. And they were like running laps around me. I was literally a deer in the headlight. I didn't know what I was doing. They held me back because I was third grade. I got held back. The only good thing about it is in New York, we start kids earlier, a year earlier. Yeah. And so by California standards, I was always in the grade I should have been when they held me back. Okay. So it didn't matter. Yeah. But yeah, it sucked. I mean, I only went there 1 year. Then I went to another school called Pinecrest, which was like a valley. You know, a lot of kids went there and knew what it was. It was like it was like summer camp full time. It was great. And, but that was expensive. And again, my grandfather was subsidizing my mother and giving her the money that she needed to, you know, help her do that. But that didn't last too long before we were back in public schools. But again, I was always, you know, kind of outgoing and bigger. Never, no, never, no. I didn't. You know, my report cards were always like great potential.
Did you like any class? Did you play sports?
I mean, I liked sports. My mother hated sports, so it was very hard to find the support for that. Yeah. And then the sport that she did support, which was one of my favorites especially at that time, was hockey. Because you got to understand, in the 80s, mall culture was everything. In the late 70s and 80s, the malls were everything. And we always seemed to live right near a school, right by a mall. And so there was always places for me to go hang out. Yeah. So I was a mall rat to the 10th power. Okay. And in my mall, when we got here, it was the Topanga Plaza, and there was an ice rink in there. Okay. And then we were a couple blocks away also from a skating rink. And I love to skate, and I love to both, you know, ice and roller, and I love music, and they go hand in hand. Totally. And so my mother was like, this is great. This is like a free babysitter, or, you know, $3, $5 babysitter every day where this guy can go. And so I spent a lot of time, you know, doing that. And when I started playing hockey, I think she liked it because it was like in a rink and it was cool in there. Well, you weren't out in the blazing sun like a soccer game would be, or baseball would be, where you're like the elements are like pinning you down. Totally. My mother's like, I'm in a nice seat in a cool, but that's a super expensive sport. Doesn't sound like it is, but hockey equipment and at the time too, nobody in LA. Hockey wasn't a thing. I'm going back before Gretzky got here, before the Kings wore black and gray. Damn. They were purple and yellow. Hockey was like a weird sport to California. California was a soccer. Yeah, everybody. I didn't know what soccer. I mean, I heard of Pele in New York when I was a kid. He was a star, but soccer, we didn't play that shit. So I'm like, we got here, and everybody's AYSO soccer. I'm like, soccer,
playing handball and
fuck
shit.
Soccer. Yeah, man. So. Hockey was my thing, but I'm a baseball nut. I mean, I'm a sports guy now more than I ever was. But as a kid, bro, I was, again, the appeal of The Outsiders when that came out was so like, I just like going. I rode a lot of BMX. Yeah. That was my thing. I skateboarded early on, but not to the. I know you're a real deal. You know, I've seen you skate, so I know. I was at a different. There were skate parks back then, but they were far from where I was at. And so I went a couple times. So we street skated a lot, but it wasn't the street skating that people are doing now. It was still when the wheels were like, you know, super 60 millimeter soft, those big squishy, so you know, big. Road riders, and fucking Sims Pure Juice, and I mean, but for me that was the. You know, that was early on, so I did a lot. But BMX was my thing, and baseball was my thing. But I never played organized baseball in my life. My mother was not having it. She didn't have the time. I get it now. I mean, all the stuff that I do, I don't know where anybody finds time to have kids or even animals. I mean, I got a little dog I adopted. I'm like, this guy wears me out, man. It's like...
Yeah. So he's getting back and forth. So did you end up graduating?
From?
School? High school?
No.
So is that so?
I often tell people I have a 9th grade education, and it's true. I mean, I made it up to 9th grade where they kind of just they've graduated everybody. They couldn't hold you back. They couldn't afford to hold you back. They can't. So they put me to high school. I got to high school. As soon as I got there, I started hanging out. Went to Taft High School. Right across the street is a Ralph's, and there was like this weird embankment. You couldn't skate it because it was too steep, but it was like a reclining chair in a parking lot in Woodland Hills, California. And keep in mind, this is 20-something years ago, 25, 6, 7 years ago, 30 years ago. The police presence in Woodland Hills was at minimal. Okay. It was like, we used to go in Ralph's, make our own sandwiches for free. You know what I mean? Like open loaves of bread, do whippets at the thing, and we were having a hoot, and they didn't care. It was like, wow. It was all like upper middle class.
No cameras everywhere and shit.
Never. Don't even get me started on that. Like the Twitter and cameras. I don't know how kids do it. They're gonna every faux pas is gonna be recorded and on their permanent record. I'd be in prison right now if there was any of that. And I know that's another thing. I was stealing so much stuff from the Topanga Plaza just to keep up with the Joneses. I remember telling my mother, I need Guess jeans. She's like, oh, awesome. I'm like, they're $130 for the overalls. And she was like, hold on, let me call your aunt. I got to tell her this is going to be great. And they were laughing their asses off. It was like, $130 would be like your kid asking you now for like $500 jeans. Yeah. And you're like, oh, you do? You need those, right? How many? 5 pairs work? 10? How many would you like?
Yeah.
Like, good luck with that. And so I was like, everybody else got them. Everybody else, in my mind, real or perceived, everybody at 16 got a car given to them. And it was like usually like a cabriolet rabbit with like, pull out Alpine stereo.
Yeah.
As many Guess jeans as you could and Tonserton as you could fit in that car. Went to get their hair done at salons and had $150 to $250 Lord Bugatti sunglasses or Ray-Bans or Persals or whatever. So I became like a branding expert just because I was looking at all the shit I didn't have and would never have. And then I figured out if I thought in my mind, if I had those things, I would feel okay about myself. And so the only way I could get those things was either steal them from the stores or sell drugs. And that was right around the time in high school when Scarface came out. And I saw that. To me, it was like a blueprint for what I could become because I thought I could do that. Because again, like book smart, it's not me. You know? I barely, everything I do is visceral and from seeing it. Thank God now for the internet, for Google. If I see somebody do it on Google, no problem. I'm the kind of dude who buys a product, gets the manual, throws it away, and go, okay, now how does this work? Like I'm not gonna. All the information I need is in that manual, but it's like kryptonite. I don't want no part of that.
Yeah.
There got to be a video to explain this because if I read it, I can't assimilate it and put it into action.
Yeah.
And so I'm doomed, or it forces a codependency on me, where I need, a girl or a friend, and you lean on them too many times, and it's unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, learn to do it yourself. Or I like this. It gives me a role. I'm never leaving like it's a whole other form of addiction.
Yeah.
And so, dude, none of these, I had no life plan. I could give 2 fucks about, and if I curse too much, I apologize. Doesn't matter. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face per se. I remember a friend of mine said, like, in 5 years I'll be, and I was like, let me stop you right there. How do you know in 5 years anything? Like I couldn't see 5 hours in front of my face, and not in a bad way. Just I was like, bro, I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning today, and I just ate.
Yeah,
I do know, but you understand. Most times, it asked me in an hour what I had. It had to take me a second to recall it, and so I just.
So what did you want to do at that point in high school? Just living.
Yeah, I mean, smash ass and like just chase girls.
When did you start partying?
Never. No.
Okay.
So I'm glad you asked that.
Because I thought it started early.
I was terrified of drugs. I don't know why. My mother was like, she was accusing me. I remember a few times she's like, "You're high." She thought I was high. It was like in 3rd, 4th grade. I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
4th grade.
Yeah, I remember it. Like it was like, "What are you talking about?" And then you got to remember there was all these like Robbie Benson type specials on the television, like where he gets high and his dad like kills him in the end. They painted drugs in like a really scary way, and I was like not interested in any of that. And then plus, I always credit like hip hop early on. Like I was early into hip hop. And it was like the things you didn't want to do was be like a drug addict in hip hop. It wasn't socially acceptable. Where in rock it might have been. It was like to drink whiskey and snort coke with Motley Crue would have been a cool, like your ultimate, or do crank with Lemmy and in hip hop it's like who you can do what
it's about
like,
that now.
White Lines was like one of the first major hits.
Which one?
White Lines and talking about like don't do it.
Yeah.
Like. You didn't hear that anywhere else.
Yeah.
And God bless hip hop for that. Now, that being said, I know now most of those dudes were doing White Lines while they're recording White Lines. A lot of the groups that you look at as like pure groups, read a few of the autobiographies. It was, they weren't living what they were preaching, but this is very rarely people are in hip hop.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that one.
I mean, now a lot of them are drug addicts now talking about being.
No, I know. It became that with the pendulum swing the other way with a lot of people. Early on, that was my appeal with Slane. It was like he was talking about, he was illustrating the life on drugs as I was like, wow, as I was going through my addiction. But early on, I didn't. So I didn't drink until I started to go to nightclubs. And in high school, when I first got to high school, there was a club called Phases in the Valley, and it was like a new wave club. And it was a teeny bopper club. And there was a few of them in Hollywood, 321 in Santa Monica, Dillon's in Westwood. Jesus, I'm thinking of the one on Beverly. Like it's escaping me right now. The Odyssey. Okay. And there was Phases in the Valley. And it was like hot chicks. You could be 16 and get in. They didn't serve alcohol, but we would get smashed in the parking lot and then go in, or we'd sneak bottles in.
Yeah. And
it was when I first got my first drunk. And I had a few, obviously, beers prior to that, or a few sips of like cognac or amaretto, or those Christmas drinks that your parents will get, or my mom used to get in a candy cane and then stash it and never drink, and we would try to drink them, and it was horrible. And then I remember that first drunk, I drank in the parking lot. I drank a screwdriver with somebody who had vodka and orange juice, and I drank it. I was like, whew, nasty. And then I went in, and like 2 minutes later, whew, and my whole world changed. And in that moment, I had that first effect, and what that looks like now as a 50-year-old looking back, I know what happened, but at the time I couldn't articulate that. And what happens is when an alcoholic drinks, and I'm an alcoholic, it not only changed the way I look at the world, but even better, the way I feel the world's looking at me.
Gotcha.
My whole perception shifts. And that's a great thing to have if you got like that stinking thinking, and you're constantly. So I felt, and I got this from a transvestite in AA years ago, who got up on the podium and said, when I drink, I feel wittier, prettier, and tittier. And I was like, that's me. Kinda. You know what I mean? But I get it. Like I felt wittier, prettier, and tittier. For an alpha male, that's crazy. And it's no Bruno, I'm just saying. Yeah. I felt like I could do this life on life's terms as long as I had a few drinks in me. It made my clothes feel lighter. I wanted to dance. I wasn't embarrassed to dance anymore in public.
Gave confidence.
It gave me false, everything just felt like there was a possibility at a win. Prior to that, I felt like everything was going to be very hard, and possibly everything was a loss, and I don't know where that comes from. Yeah. It probably comes from a broken home.
Totally.
The instability that I felt growing up always felt like the rug was always going to be, there was always impending doom and a dark cloud. And that no
stability, no security.
Yeah, the ground was very shaky, and the rug was going to get pulled out at any time. I thought everything from the outside would fix me. If I had these clothes, if I stole these clothes and rocked these clothes to school, and make no mistake, when I got those clothes, I felt a lot better about myself. Like, you show up at school dripped in Guess and Fila and all the other stuff we used to rack. I felt great about myself, but it was a temporary fix for a long-term problem. And the problem is that it's a Band-Aid for a bullet hole. And the emptiness I felt inside, for years I spent pouring drinks down it, putting clothes on it, trying to do extracurricular stuff that made me feel that I was important. And, you find out, if you're lucky, you'll find out that doesn't work in time. To then figure out, okay, it's a spiritual malady, and it's that God-shaped hole, and it's something that you fix from the inside out, not the outside in, and then you work on that. And so, but back then I could care less. I like to fight. I don't say that like in a I'm nice with my hands.
A chip on your shoulder,
yeah,
too.
And I feel like, it was like a tough guy thing. My father was a tough guy, air quotes, and my mother used to tell war stories about this, that, and the third. And I was always like a skinny guy, but a tall guy, and I'm just quick with my, and joined the gang early on. And
out of high school?
In high school. Okay. First got to high school, the dudes I was all hanging out with were all coming out of a place called Rancho San Antonio, which is a boys' home.
Okay.
So juvenile hall would send those kids there, and they would live there all week, and then they get a weekend pass to go home with their parents, and they come back, and it was a boys' home. And a lot of those dudes, when they got out, then they ended up going to Taft for whatever reason.
Okay.
And the kids I gravitated to were white dudes that dressed like cholos, so they look like suicidal tendency members type of shit. Those MacArthur jackets, slick back hair, winos,
Pendletons, all that shit.
Pendletons and Dickies, white T-shirts. They look like greasers. They look like gas station attendants. Mailman shoes, Dickies, white T-shirts. And so I was like, okay, I like that, because we had already pivoted out of that. Like, Guess was originally when I got to 10th grade, but soon I was like, nah, I ain't, it was like chicks rocked it more than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Than dudes. And immediately I was like, these are the dudes that I like. They're cool. They're hanging out. They're not going in the classroom, and they're hanging out here chilling.
Yeah.
I'm with these dudes. And so we started going to we used to go to a store in Reseda, an Army-Navy store, and there used to be one on Ventura, Valley Doughboy. And my man was like, yo, go up to Valley Doughboy, get you some Dickies with the pleats, take them to this cleaners, and they'll peg them for you. Because we used to taper the legs. We didn't like them straight leg. We would taper it a little bit.
Yeah.
We'd go out to Santa Monica to Nana's and get Doc Martens and get Creepers and get...
I used to work there,
Yeah, so it's like... my whole thing exfoliated into this whole other life in high school.
Yeah, were they into punk and hip hop? Was that?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah. Everybody, that was alternative. Before there was alternative, like when you're thinking of like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains' alternative music.
Yeah.
At that time, soon after I ended up working at a record store. When I worked at a record store in the 80s, there was rock, R&B. Classical, and then like if you wanted 24/7 Spies when it came out, you'd probably look in the world music, because we didn't even have a reggae section. And then when we got a reggae section, it was mislabeled so that they had to put a sticker, this is not a reggae record, put in rock.
Okay.
We didn't carry Bad Brains albums. If we did, they wouldn't know. If you wanted hip hop, it'd be in the R&B section, because we didn't have a section for hip hop.
Crazy, man.
I mean, the world has changed dramatically. There's so many subcategories now. So for me, anything counterculture was appealing. So punk rock, especially LA, like skate punk rock, all the stuff that was coming out of Oxnard. So like Ill Repute, Stalag 13, Aggression, Dr. No. And then I loved Suicidal Tendencies. That was the first album that got me open. Like, I didn't like punk, like Sex Pistols and all that stuff. I learned later how important and what incredible,
for sure.
thing. But that wasn't my first, like, if that was punk, it didn't have no backbeat. I'm a Gap Band type of dude. I like a heavy, like, I like hip hop. But for me, when I heard the Suicidal record, I was like, I like this too. This is new. This is nice. And I hated anything that was Hesher, because those dudes were dicks. Like the status quo rock guy was a dick. So if you were into hip hop, you were a wannabe, fill in the blank. You know what I'm saying? If you were into punk, you were, I don't even want to say, nowadays, but F words and N words, like they were thrown around loosely, and you just had to be rock or you were dead to them. And I'm like, fuck all y'all. And that was the beauty of going to Taft. I lived in a condominium building that was split right down the middle, and I was probably 5 units over from going to another school called Cleveland. And Cleveland was like the hotbed for like Hesher Central. And if you don't know what Hesher is, it was an old like word we used to call these rock dicks as a as a
people
put
still
down.
use that now, I think.
Right, but it's a California thing. I remember telling people in New York, they're like, Hesher, it's like, these fucking Heshers, like get a haircut, hippie. We just, we give it to them too.
Yeah.
But when I got to high school, I found these guys that were, again, they were like listening to all the skate punk stuff. Agent Orange, I loved.
JFA, all that shit.
All of it, bro. Circle Jerks, all that California skate stuff. It all went hand in hand. Dudes were coming out of like juvenile hall, coming out of boys' home with a skateboard in their hand, looking like, like they just worked at a gas station in the 50s, listening to punk and listening to early hip hop.
Yeah.
And it was like that.
That's awesome.
And those were the dudes I ran with, you know. And then as we started venturing out into the into the world, we stuck together because we looked different.
Yeah.
And if you got a girlfriend at that time and the parents saw you, they're like, can I speak to you in the kitchen? You knew already what was coming. Like, you got to get your shit and go home because you just looked different. You spoke different.
Yeah.
You may have bleached your hair. You may have spiked your hair. You may have slicked it back. And to them, they were mortified. Who the fuck is this guy and why is he in my house?
Mm-hmm.
You might have lived 2 blocks over, but you didn't look like kids that lived 2 blocks over. Because they were still wearing like gotcha shorts and
OP shorts.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, per se,
What was your first hip hop that really you love, like you're exposed to?
So because I was in a skating rink when I'm a kid, obviously, Sugar Hill Gang came out.
Yeah.
But at the time, I didn't recognize that as being hip hop. I recognized it as being an odd song similar to Rock Lobster or pop music. Talk about
pop music.
It was just an odd song that didn't look or sound like any other song.
There's really no name for it.
Yeah, I don't know. That was hip hop, and it was based off of what is it? The beat is from Chic, Freak Out.
Freak Out. Maybe not.
Yeah, but what is? It's sampled from something else that we already know is a disco hit. So again, it escapes me off the top.
So that was the first exposure.
So that was the first. But then when I heard the message, I was like, now there's 2. Now you can string it together. And now I'm starting to see a pattern.
Yeah.
And I got to also say that Radio Clash and Magnificent Seven, what the Clash was doing.
Yeah.
Early on was early on for me. So I seen those videos. I was like, that is crazy. Cause now these two and Malcolm McLaren and all of that stuff, when that started to happen, that's really when I jumped all in. Plus I always liked, for me, I missed, the real punk thing. People at my age were still doing it, but it was, you get spit on or you get beat up if you were charged GBH punk. I have a kid that I'm still friends with, Bob Raft. They used to do him dirty in our neighborhood. They didn't like that. Parents would talk shit. People just didn't want to see that. They didn't want to see Liberty spikes and your jacket studded out and nose piercings with they were scared of it. They were scared because now you're threatening their stability in suburbia. Yeah. Because if you can influence their kids to be like that, there goes the neighborhood.
Totally.
So people really did him dirty, and he prevailed regardless, which is great. But I didn't want no part of that neither. That wasn't my type of. Yeah. Again, I like backbeat to my music, so that wasn't my thing. But what I liked about hip hop was the scavenger hunt and the whole thing. And it's still it's the secret to my success, air quotes if I'm being a bit cheeky, but anytime that there's a rabbit hole that I can go down and look for parts and then build this incredible thing that is, the sum total of those parts, the parts if you spread them on the table, they're cool, but they're not much. You put them together and now you're like, I see it. Kind of like the puzzle you got on the table behind you. A couple pieces and they're like, so what? Put them together. Now you see a whole different picture.
Yeah.
Similar to, I'm sure, the kids that are a few years older than me, in punk, it was similar to that for me with hip hop, meaning if I wanted suede Pumas that were purple, they weren't going to be found in Woodland Hills, California, or Sherman Oaks, or anywhere in the San Fernando Valley. You would actually have to go to the Fox Hills Mall out by LAX and possibly risk your life or just be, why are 2 white boys walking in the Fox Hills Mall or this Lawson swap meet? But to me, it was a badge of honor. We went out to this Lawson swap meet. We copped fake Gazelles. We caught some Puma Clydes. We caught, you know what I mean? Whatever we caught, a Kangol hat, blah, blah, blah. And, you string it all together. And then when you get your little ensemble going, because it was also money prohibitive too. Fila's were $100 shoes back then. Where am I going to get $100? Yeah. And so, but I did get $100. And then all of a sudden I got a little, and then I would test it out on the schoolyard parking lot. And then people were like, yo, what's up? I met a lot of kids back then. There was not a lot, but there was a handful of kids that were B-boys too. And they recognized your B-boy. And it's it was you find your tribe that way. We're all peacocking to find our people. We're signaling hey, I'm involved in this. Who sees me? Who else is here? You know what I mean? And then you got to, sniff their ass and figure out if it's if they're official with it or not, if you want to run with them. And so.
And then you had to take a crazy mission just to get the shit too.
No, that's what I'm saying. We went on missions all the time. Yeah. I mean, that was more of a source of bad blood when people would go somewhere without you and they'd come back from Long Beach with records. You're like, you didn't call me? Bro, all right, I see how you guys are. Like missions with no permission. You ain't asking the kid if he wants to go get records too. I see you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was like that. But that was the fun of being. You had to actually buy in at 100%, not just go on the internet and get the latest craze delivered to your door via Amazon. You know. And so I missed that part of it, and I fulfill it now with what I'm doing in Tulsa. But again, that's deeply ingrained in my DNA as a hunter-gatherer and as a Sagittarius. And
as all the pieces put together. I love that.
Yeah, it's bigger. It's bigger again. It's you know.
So when did you realize that you wanted to start rhyming and stuff? Like, did you have a first?
I never wanted to realize any of that stuff. So I still consider myself a b-boy out of all the phases I've been through and all the little, you know, I was a mod for a year or two and rocking like that. And I was always like a little bit of everything. When we used to do that Mickey Mouse Club, which was our little gang, we were rocking, we looked like the Fishbone album cover. I mean, Dickies, monkey boots, you know, sometimes vests from a suit, white t-shirts, suspenders, flat tops, slick back, whatever. It was a little bit of everything
mixed. Yeah.
So I love ska and reggae and hip hop, and it was all to me counterculture stuff. It was not the stuff you were going to find at your regular record store on the end caps. It just wasn't.
Yeah. And
it was the kind of stuff you had to go to Moby Disc to find. You know, and I love new wave like nobody's business too, which is like people are like, what? Like, I'm like, bro, you have no idea. You know, my knowledge of that as well is like, you know, it's a sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
When hip hop started popping, at first graffiti was my thing. Like I used to write in sketchbooks all day long with another kid, Matt Champy, who was my man, rest in peace. And that was really the art of it was my love. And that's why I love hip hop in general. You know, it's got it's 5 elements that make up the culture.
Yeah.
Language. You know, at the time, you tell your mother it's fresh, she's thinking you're talking about bread, or you were a little out of line. You got fresh with your grandma, and when you said that, watch your mouth, you know?
Yeah.
Dance.
Yeah.
So breakdancing when that came, mind-boggling. I used to break too. Popping, locking, all of it. It was like Michael Jackson moonwalk. It was old hat to us.
Yeah.
In LA, people who were already doing that shit for a year or two.
Yeah.
We'd already seen it mad times.
Yeah.
So why the rest of the world was like, oh my God, he just invented a move right there. Nah. But it was impressive nonetheless that he brought it to the masses. The instrument was a turntable, because never in history had somebody used it to break beats and then scratch. So it was an instrument in its own.
Yeah.
And the fashion, the clothing, the fucking, it signaled to everybody else, I'm down with this.
Yeah.
Like, where else were you going to see somebody rocking a Kangol that wasn't in like London and was over the age of 60?
Yeah.
Like,
it's true.
Heads were rocking.
Yeah.
Gazelles, they're old man glasses. It's like, and they're $280 in the 80s.
Damn.
I got to have 5 bars. You know what I mean? It's like, and the only way you can get those is to steal or be rich. And I was not rich. Man. Yeah. We used to evict them. We used to go into old optometrists. They seen us coming too. They couldn't even, it was too late. Can we try them on? They were like, no, but they did it anyway because they, you know, and then pew, we're out the door, bro, giggling and laughing our asses off all the way down the street. You know,
wow.
You know, it was.
And then number 5 is graffiti.
And then, graffiti is the art form, and tagging and just the letter styles. All
what did you write, Danny Boy?
I'm trying to think. I had a few different names, man. And I don't. Danny Boy, of course, I wrote, but I wrote Cash for a long time, which was like for a long time. It was about a year. People still remember that too. It's weird. I would get into something and then pivot right out. You know, I'd be like, I like graffiti, and then I'd hit a wall where I wasn't getting any better. And then I go, this sucks because I'm not great at it, but I'm okay. I can always do a throwy to get by and a nice hand styles, and people think. But when it came to piecing, I was like, it's tough. It looks a lot easier than it was.
Yeah,
I'm gonna start breaking more, and then I break a little bit, but I was like, I'm good, but only to if you've seen it once, you've seen it 100 times. It was a pattern, and then I couldn't go past that because I wasn't willing to put in the time to go, and then I would pivot into. But rhyming was never something I ever thought. Yeah. I wish I had it like that. I used to sit down and write rhymes, and they were adequate, but they weren't great. Never in a million years I think I spent 26 years in the fray of hip hop because I'm not an MC, and I never claimed to be an MC. Hence, when I met Everlast and he could rhyme at that level, I was like, wow. And what he was missing, I had. It was the visuals, was the art, was the look and the vibe and the name that he didn't have.
So you met him in high school?
I met him in high school. He was one of those other dudes that if you know, again, there was a handful of us.
You remember Woodland Hills, right?
In Woodland Hills, yeah. Epic, you know, from Crazy Town.
Yeah.
But people know him maybe from Crazy Town. He was making records in high school with Belle Biv DeVoe. You know, Wolf and Epic bring the instrumental, doing, you know, Poison remixes and working on Search's solo album. And so, but he was official B-boy. I'll never take that away from him, man. You know, and I like dude, but I mean, we've had our ups and downs throughout the years. Who hasn't? But he was official. Like his whole stance was like this. Yeah. He had this poise to him. Like he was official B-boy when many heads were, and he was plugged in to all of these cats that were coming out from other places, living in Woodland Hills, like New Edition and LL Cool J and all of them, and he was in the mix with them. So
this is before Everlast was in Rhyme Syndicate. He was just a dude.
Nah, he was hanging out with Divine Styler a lot, and Divine was you know, him and them got Divine and Eric got signed to Ice-T's thing, which was phenomenal, man. What dudes in high school are getting signed to Ice-T, who was a god, you know, at that point.
Like, I just saw him talking about you guys on Drink Champs the other day.
Okay,
so it was cool.
Yeah.
So he found him somehow, and then you met him.
I think he found him through Divine and Blau. Blau Bashar was the dude who was producing all the stuff for Ice-T, a lot of stuff for Ice-T, and so he was trying to bring him other acts that he could sign. So
you're like from punk rock, skateboarding, hip hop, everything. And then you meet Eric, who's he doesn't come from that world really, right?
No. I mean, Eric just knew hip hop and probably classic rock because his father or whatever. I mean, again, and he could answer that better than I could. Yeah. It's not but I felt that I was able to enlighten him or turn him on to a lot of stuff that he might have missed. He was very singular in purpose and in focus, which was to be an MC. I think he kind of cut the fat away from anything else and put his blinders on, which you would do if you're going to be the best at something. I just seen a quote. You know, you see a million quotes on the internet, but some are really like impactful. And it went something like, you know, find out what you love and then say no to everything else.
I love that.
And that's good because you can't keep. If you got your finger in every pie, nothing gets baked that way. You know what I mean? Or you don't get to eat the. Yeah. And so he might have been saying no to everything else that wasn't hip hop. So when he met me, I coming out of working at a record store. Again, we stole more than we sold, and we sold a lot of records. And my record collection was like nasty, because it just. Bro, I was getting take money, you know what I mean? Yeah. So you come to my house, I could turn you on to everything. And I was taking records based off of what I thought they were too. I thought Celtic Frost was an Irish band. You know what I mean? I was like, for real. I was like, oh, this looks like a cool Irish band, Celtic Frost. Little did I know, you know. First Bad Brains album I heard when I was a product manager and I opened Quickness. I knew who they were prior to that, but it wasn't my cup of tea. Yeah. And then I heard the Quickness and I liked the way Mackey's drums were. Yeah. It had a hip hop vibe to it. Like with the Quickness sounded like, you know, minute take that hardcore. Yeah. Mash it up with hip hop. It was like just like it had like a oh my God. And then I was like, dude, Bad Brains rules. But prior to that, it wouldn't have been something I would have been gravitating towards because it just was so teeny and stringent to my roller skating big anthem type shit, you know? I like Freak Out by Chic. I like the way Nile plays the bass. I like the Gap Band. I like how those big keys and drum pattern sound. That was always my thing. And so when I heard punk in that level, at first it was too fast and too guitar driven and not my, but eventually I come back. Like so eventually I come back and just rediscovered all that stuff around that era. But believe me when I tell you, I was a wizard to most kids. And they might be rolling their eyes if they grew up with me, but it is what it is. Like I feel like there was other kids that were also on it like that. You know, you had people who knew what time it was with all types of shit. But I was pretty good at getting a lot of people who didn't understand that there was other stuff to be had out there. Yeah. And not only showing you it, I could get it to because I worked at the record store, bro. What do you want? Come on in. I'll charge you $5 for $500 worth of stuff. Yeah, come through my line. Yeah.
You leave how long that place lasts in business?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I probably still owe an amends. I know I do actually. Sorry.
So then you meet Eric, and then who comes up with the name and the vision for the band? Because I know you. No,
so it was already a band that I was trying to do with this other kid Baron and a few other dudes. It was just I started working for a friend of mine who was living in we got out of school and he started working for his father in Irvine, California. And he was like, you could come work with my dad and we could stay out there. I was like, that's cool. So we ended up going out there. And it was just like we had no real. The dad was hiring us just to keep us off the streets, but it was like. It was living in Irvine when you're just getting out of high school era and all your friends it was like living in another world where you knew nobody and there was nothing to do. So I spent hours just at the copier machine and back doing cut and paste art, making J cassette labels for ones I had lost in somebody's car, didn't have the right. It was so silly. And then I started making up fake bands, and House of Pain was one of them. And I got the name from an Oingo Boingo song that I had listened to and went to the concert, and they went. Again, we do need 2 hours. I feel bad because I didn't know if it was going to be there's so much to dig into. But the vision, it was for me. Yeah, there's a song called No Spill Blood, and it's about the island of Dr. Moreau, which is the classic Animal Farm. What's his name? I'm forgetting.
Animal Farm.
Yeah, Animal Farm. The book. Who wrote that? Man, I sound crazy. I forget we're recording. It's not even stupider. But regardless, there's a song called No Spill Blood. I went to see them at the Greek. They hadn't been on stage like in a couple of years because they had a problem with like A&M Records or whoever they were signed to, IRS Records actually. And then they finally played and they went overtime, and the stagehands were like, "You got to pull the plug." And they're like, "We're not ready to stop." And a guy came out and was like, guys, they're going to quit or they're going to charge us triple overtime. And they finally said, "Fuck them. I don't give a fuck. You know what happens when you break the law? You go back to the House of Pain." And then they kicked in this song. It sounds like a scratch. Down, 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 down. And it goes to the House of Pain, and that's so
where they came from. Oh,
yeah,
shit.
And I got it from that, never thinking. My
wife's gonna love that.
I made a fake cassette where it said House of Pain on it. And so when I met Everlast again, like he'd been in my peripheral. We weren't like tight. We hung out a few times. That was it. And one day I had his number and I called him and he was like, "Yo, I can't talk right now. My mother's throwing me out." I'm like, "Oh, fuck." I'm like, "You need anything?" He was like, "I've called my girl already, but I'm waiting to her." I said, "I can come get you if you want. I'll come pick you up, man. What do you need?" "I need a place to stay real quick." I'm like, "I got you." So I jumped in my Jeep. I just happened to be in the Valley, but I lived all the way out in Moore Park with my cousin.
Moore Park, yeah.
We were doing crazy credit card schemes and so I picked him up, brought him over, opened the wardrobe, so pick what you want. We were racking and doing a lot of crime, bro.
Yeah.
This is not fiction. This is all fact, bro. This is all like, everybody will tell you about that.
We're learning a lot about you today.
And so I'm like, "Yo, bro," I gave him a fucking Spree scooter that I had so he could get transportation, and blessed him with some jump offs, and he was looking through the cassettes. He's like, "What's House of Pain?" I'm like, "Well, it's nothing really. It's our band." And then I just
guys have songs and shit?
No, we had nothing. We played like little jam shit in my mother's garage at one point. And then slowly but surely he was looking for something to do because, the Everlast thing that he was with Rhyme Syndicate fizzled for him, And so I just kept, at the time, bro, I didn't think in a million years we were going to make a group. I was just like, he's cool. I admire him for his ability to rap.
Yep.
At the time, man, I had my own little following, you know what I mean? And bigger than his. For the Mickey Mouse Club heads that are still in the world hitting me up online, still talking about shit 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I had a little, my little own cult of Danny Boy going on for a year, and we were always making money and doing shit. My cousin worked at Tony Roma's. He was bringing home steak and lobsters and shrimps every night. So much so we're like, "Bro, stop. We're good. Yeah. Like, we can't have any more, bro. No more lobsters for us. Stop." I mean, every night it was that. And Eric will tell you that too, And we was always doing credit card shit. So the fridge was full with cold beer. The freezer was filled with lobster, steaks, and shrimp. I had a car, 19. I had a car, a GSXR. I had a Jeep on Mickey Thompson's with a Benetton steering wheel. I had a GSXR motorcycle. I had a Spree scooter that I said you could take it to go wherever you want if you feel like, And we was out there getting money and getting clothing and getting Adrian Vittadini 1,000 thread count sheets for the beds and deluxe lamps and lights, and everybody knows this. Like, it's old school. That's how I really, G'd off with Eric. And it was like, I was like, we should do a band. And my mind was like, "Yo, I'll help you with the aesthetics."
Yeah.
You rhyme. Let
you
us
had
do
a vision
this.
for it.
Yeah, and I also felt like, a lot of the stuff he was rhyming about was about Mickey Mouse Club, that shit. He wasn't rhyming about because he had no experience in that. And so he was able to see what we were doing with all these Irish kids. Gator was around, Justin Harris, and this dude, Todd Bailey, and me. And I remember Eric and Todd were really good because they both smoked weed a lot. I wasn't a weed smoker. I was still just a drinker back then.
Yeah.
But these are all good dudes, man. These are all good, wholesome white boys that are like, and he's seen that for the first time, that like, I feel like he felt he was an island in hip hop as a white guy.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden he found dudes that were like, "We like you, and we like this." I remember we took him out to his birthday. I think when he turned like 21, we threw him this big old party. We had it like that. I had it like that. Put everything on the card. So somebody had it like that. It wasn't my card, but we had it like that, you know? And we were like, yo, we celebrated this dude.
Yeah.
I love this dude like that. You know, I was like, yo, if you're my people, I'll do whatever I can. Yeah. If you need $10 and I only got 5, I'll give you my 5 and I'll go steal the other 5 or borrow the other 5. And that's real talk. And anybody who really is my people, test it, you'll find out. You know, you'll see that it's real. People know that. So there was no, you think in a million years I could have thought we're going to make a band and sell 1 million records? Are you fucking kidding? Bro, that's not even, that's fantasy shit. I didn't dream that big. I didn't even care. I was just trying to like, you're a dude that I admire for your rhyming skills. I know your deal's up. I remember when he got his first Sentra and was living in Studio City with D-Rock D, and then he crashed his car and the deal was done, and it was over. Yeah. So I wasn't on the dick for any other reason than I was like, yo, you're a B-boy. I remember you. Come, what can I do? Yeah. Rock with us. We got you. Yeah. You know? It was like that. There was no, again. And so he started getting like, you know, acclimated with how we were doing that Mickey Mouse Club shit, which was mostly Irish dudes, a few black dudes, a few Mexican dudes. But there was like that kind of look and aesthetic and vibe. Yeah. Flannels and Dickies and just dudes that we would thump. We go to clubs and someone would give you lip. It was over. It was like out of the woodworks, 15 dudes are just eating your lunch. Yeah. You're like, what in the hell just happened? Like, he says something to Snoops. You know, he says something to Gator. It's over. It's like all of a sudden it was like, you know.
And Eric was with you guys hanging out.
Yeah. So then I think the first time he saw dudes that will actually fight for you and not ask anything in return except for friendship. Yeah. And so we did that. And then he moved back after he stayed with us for a couple months, me and my cousin. He moved in with his girlfriend in Hollywood. And we had talked about doing the group, but it's kind of like I started doing a little bit of art, making some T-shirts for it, and whatever.
That's one thing. You're really artistic. You've created so many things. We'll get into that in part 2, but like you very have an artistic mind. And did you do any art in school, or just that came after school?
I had a friend who was his other brothers were in Mickey Mouse Club with me, the Alec family, and there was like 6 of them brothers, and Terry was my original friend, which was my age, maybe 1 grade ahead. And he used to come to school every day in a new shirt. If a concert passed through Southern California, the next day he got the Madness shirt. Then he's got the Who. Then he's got Judas Priest. I'm like, bro, you going to concerts every night in 8th grade? What is going on? He's like, no, my dad's a silk screener. And I'm like, silk screener? I'm thinking like Chinese, like silk screen. What does that mean? Yeah. He's like, we print T-shirts, and these are off registration. This is back when you had to cut the design in Ruby, which is this whole. There was no, bro. I could do 2 hours just on this whole story. Long story longer, he's like, come to my dad's work. We have a bin filled with seconds, basically where the registration was off, or they just tested it on another shirt and they threw it in. Bro, we went crazy. Can you imagine in 7th grade going to somebody's misprint bin with Madness, the Specials, the Who, and they're like, you can have any of those. You're actually doing us a favor. We don't have to carry them to it. I was like, I'm going to be a silk screener when I grow up.
That was your shit right then.
And so I started realizing the power of you basically put a TV set in that era on your shirt. Yeah. It's a billboard. And I was like, I want to do that. And so I started doing like 1-color art, because that's every time you had a color in a T-shirt, you had to cut a separate screen for that by hand. Damn. Imagine it's like cutting stencils. DIY. Yeah. And then those all had to match up and register right. So every color had a different screen. Yeah. And a computer didn't just burn that through like it does now, where you print film, the film goes into the emulsion, the emulsion gets camerized, it blows out with a high pressure. This was a little different. You had to cut that by hand, and you had to be precise. And then I started making T-shirts for like Santa Barbara. They'd have this Isla Vista thing every year. They'd have a big blowout thing, and I would take T-shirts up there, like make corny like Bart Simpson at the beer keg college shirts, and we'd sell them through the roof. I brought Eric up there one year too. We made like, or maybe he didn't come up there. I went up there and made a couple $1,000s in high school. Damn. Like just, I was always hustling and doing weirdo shit. Man. I was always like, which is shocking, because then I spent the next 20 years after House of Pain, like literally not 20, but 10 years living on my knees. Couldn't think of a creative way to dig myself out of a hole to save my life. So it's weird. You'd be so like always, on point with like making maneuvers, and then for the life of me, I couldn't think of anything except for to do drugs, which we can get into later on the other end. But
this is amazing.
All of this started with with concepts, man. My whole life I've been pulling shit out of thin air and then trying to figure out how I can bring it to existence and make it work.
Yeah.
And so with House of Pain, it started off with a bullshit little tape that I had, for no apparent reason, made a J card, which is just basically the art that's inside of a cassette thing. A lot of times in the 80s, you bring a few cassettes with you to the someone would pick you up and you're like, I'm bringing my cuts so that we could listen to this record tonight, because otherwise we'll have to listen to that record on. And then I would leave it in the car and they would return it without the case. I'm like, yo. So I would buy the empty cases and then I would at work I could on the Xerox copier kind of recreate my own little J card for it. It was so silly, but that's how the House of Pain kind of got together. As far as that, it was my concept. And then I started working on logos, which Rick Kloss from Fresh Jive helped me with the first one. Like I laid it out and cut and paste. That's where I learned to love the Sex Pistols later on, whereas I look back and I was like, all that Jamie Reed stuff was cut and paste. I took Mickey's logo and I told Rick I want to match that font, but I wanted to say House of Pain, and I wanted to say Fine Malt Lyrics instead of Fine Malt Liquor. And then I wanted to say, it used to say like a new fresh twist off cap. And originally it said new fresh twist on wrap or something. It was it was corny, but it was like, it represented us. It was like Irish. I changed the middle to to a bigger shamrock with the Irish flag behind it. But at the time, I mean, we were rocking like all that. We were wearing, cholo shit with Ireland hat patches on the hat, or, we were like, little like Westies and stuff.
Irish
in my mind, it was like a State of Grace thing. When that came out, we were like, man, we were years ahead of the curve, because we felt like that. We felt like a bunch of like ragtag Irish dudes. And the next thing, I apologize because I didn't know, we were going to do, and I'm always willing to tell my story. Unfortunately, I got
this will be the end of part one.
Another thing, but I got to tell you this, man, and this is a good segue because we can get right back into where it picks up. I had already been, in my mind, invested in the culture of hip hop for close to 10 years, literally since I first heard, the Grandmaster Flash and Sugar Hill Gang. And all the while, everybody, it was always cool. The only flack I got were from other white kids who were like, wigger or what. They never said it to my face, but I know what they were saying, And then all of a sudden, when Public Enemy became a thing, and I bought that record as soon as I bought it sight unseen because I had heard about them. Mm-hmm. And I bought You're Gonna Get Yours, and my Uzi weighs a ton, 12-inch. And I remember playing it for my mother, and she hated it. And I was like, it's great. That's why you hate it. Because now I've her musical tastes were always good. Yeah. Great. Motown. But this was and she was like, oh, it's not her cup of tea, which is at at the point where you're like, yes, if it offends parents, this is my record. Sure. But what that started to kick off was a lot of like it was kicking off a lot of Farrakhan stuff and 5%er stuff. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I started hearing White Devil this and White Devil that. And I'm like, whoa. So now I'm the problem. Like I've been in here in the trenches, like doing my thing from Uncle Jam's army parties. I was like the only white kid in the whole spot. Mm-hmm. The Sherman Square roller rink, when there was like a handful, it would be like me, Eric, and Brett Mazer, epic. Yeah. Very little. There was you could count on one hand the kids that were really in it, and we were them. And now all of a sudden I'm like getting those. They're joking, cats I was running with. What's up, White Devil? I'm like, White Devil, come on, man. And it was starting to spread.
The narrative going on, yeah.
That's when I went home and I told my mother, what am I? She's like, what? I'm like, what are we? Do we ever have, anything to do with slavery? She's like, dummy, your grandparents came here 50 years ago from Ireland. We left Ireland because you're Catholic and they were oppressed. And so we came here, they came here for a better life. Your father, when he was in the Attica riots, actually refused to participate in that, in the race riot and actually defended somebody with a shovel. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So now I felt like, fuck that. I'm Irish. Like you telling, all I'm hearing is I'm the problem, but we came from our own problems to try to find a better life and assimilate as well. So for me, it was my thing to say, like, I'm white in hip hop, but I'm Irish because, you know what I mean? Like, this is who I am. And I'm going to do what you're doing with, the black, it felt like black power to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's fine as long as you're not trying to beat me over the head with it. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I'm on your side in the trenches doing what we do in hip hop. I couldn't see past any of that shit. So for me, it was like a okay, here's who I am. So I don't know what the Pilgrims and Wasps from, you know what I mean, did. I'm getting painted with the brush for something that has nothing to do with me. And for me, and still in my heart of heart, and I don't know how it sounds, and we live in such a world where everything is labeled, but I feel like when somebody says white, what does that mean? Because there's so many different flavors of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you just came from the Ukraine, are you white? I don't know. Or are you Ukrainian? Or do we look at you as, you know what I mean? If you're from Bosnia and you're Muslim and you're white, or what, are you responsible? I don't, you know what I mean? It just gets messy. Yeah. And at a time where I was still in that like bubble of like, I'm just a B-boy and everything else is I don't do politics and all that. So it was like, I'm Irish and we're going to roll with this. So I don't want you to think anything other than what I am. So here's who I am. I'm a middle-class kid from suburban neighborhood who's involved in like a little bullshit street, shit. Yeah. In the punk rock gang thing. And we have a band. So the way Suicidal has a gang with their band, we're now a band who has a gang as well. Mm-hmm. And this is who we are. And that's really the impetus for me for House of Pain. That had nothing to do with Everlast because I don't think he was even... Yeah. We were on the same wavelength when it comes to what our purpose to do. Yeah. He often cites that it's from the Island of Dr. Moreau, the book, that the name came from, but that's not true because he got the name from me, and I'm telling you it came from Oingo Boingo. Oh, that's crazy. And it's just is what it is, and you can Google the show where it was at the Greek in the 80s, and so that's where So again, as we move forward, I'll tell you how. We carved our little niche in that, and what we did was we woke up millions of kids who felt the same way, who was like, maybe their parents like, I don't want you listening to that music, and maybe their peers are like, that's for the brothers. What are you doing with that? And the Beastie Boys were a great, kicked down a lot of doors for making it acceptable, but there still was not that like harder version of that. Mm-hmm. So if you were alpha male, which now is like, again, air quotes of that toxic masculinity, like I don't feel that way. I feel, and I know you and me might have different opinions on that, but that's cool. But I feel like, yo, bro, we survived in an era where you had to be masculine to get over and to be involved, because you get washed out if you weren't. Yeah, we it's like only the strong survive.
Especially you guys when you came out, for sure.
And we were punching fuckers out their shirts. I mean, it was like we put our hands on everybody, got in our way, and that's fact. I mean, short of the Booyah Tribe, everybody was suspect. Everybody could get it. You know what I mean? Like, I'll stop with the Booyah Tribe, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other groups that got like brolic dudes. But short of the Booyah Tribe, I'll mix it up with whoever want it. Like for real. And still will, unfortunately, because
you came in there kind of with something to prove at that point.
Yeah, of course, our backs were against the wall, and I felt like nobody had really just went with it that way. Yeah, and the way Eric wrote was genius because it had that cadence and it had that aggression, and it was piggybacked off of Cypress's shit. And they were also like, here's this Latin group that's coming has a New York style, but it's coming out of LA per se, and same with us. And it was the perfect pairing in that time. But for me, I had always been on that like that rah white boy shit, and not as a racist, as just being proud of being a white boy who could actually thrive in a hostile environment, which was hip hop. It wasn't all Fresh Prince and that. I didn't see that type of hip hop. That hip hop was garbage to me. Like we were in the cut with Bloods and Crips going at it. You know what I mean? Yeah. In the middle, just to see like UTFO play in Reseda. And bro, it wasn't like we were going to the Forum to see Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. You couldn't have paid me to go see that. Yeah. And that's all due respect to Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff, but that's just not my flavor of hip hop. Yeah. So. And
when you guys came out, you guys looked like, I thought you were a New York group. And that was definitely, now hearing your story, it's definitely your influence. Like you guys look like hardcore kids and shit.
It was intentional though. I mean, we were, and again, the State of Grace thing had came out already. It's in my mind. I was already in 3/4 length leather jackets and fedora hats. That's right. Trying to do, the Irish Mob and Hell's Kitchen thing meets suicidal tendency thing. It's all in there. It's all in the soup, bro. Yeah. It's all in the sausage. I mean, it really is. It's all those little influences are intentionally being represented, and so are the outsiders. So is the denim vest, and then I saw that in hip hop early on with Lee jackets and Levi's. So there's a lot of crossover in that kind of look. Yeah, the Canadian tuxedo, my friend.
Yeah. All right, this is great. This is gonna be part 1 of me and Danny. Well, this is fucking awesome. I could talk to you for hours. I learned so much about you in fucking 55 minutes. So we're gonna have a part 2 coming, everybody, and I'm fucking stoked. Thank you, Danny boy. This is
my pleasure, my man. Give me one for the Book of Faces. I'm trying to take a picture of Toby right now with those gold teeth he got going. He got those teethuses. Good stuff, my man.
I'm going to pause this, but thank you, David. This is part 1, everybody. Fuck, what are you doing later? We're going to have to meet up.
That's it. Come on.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Hey, guys. Thanks for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet to this podcast, please do that. And whatever platform you are listening to this on, I'm glad you found me. You can rate me and review me on there also. So thank you guys sincerely for the support. I cannot wait for you guys to hear the next one.